I feel as though I know a lot of you through little silhouettes on Zoom, sort of dozing in front of your laptop. So it's really nice to see real people again. As Lauren said, I'm Tim Coleshaw. I took over the chair of the BDS at the start of this year, so I'm pretty new to the society. But we thought that we would kick off the proceedings today with a sort of quick review of some of the highlights, not of the last 40 years, because that would take too long, but of the last 10 years of life in the BDS. And the first of those is really all about you, because one of the outstanding features of this society over the last 10 years has been the generosity of the members and the parts that you play in the running of the society. So first of all, the time that you put in, sort of recording dragonflies, county dragonfly recorders, all these sort of collation of that work that you do, people that help out at events, it's all much appreciated, and it makes an enormous difference to what the society is able to do. Also, the donations that members make a huge difference to what we do, and a lot of the really nice dragonfly interpretation and signboards that you see around our hotspot sites are there because of the donations that you've made. So thank you for those. And just looking at legacies, these have made an enormous difference to the running of the society over the last 10 years. They brought in about £420,000 in total over 10 years, which in itself is a fantastic figure. But because we had those legacies, we were also able to employ a grants officer, Sarah, who is here today, and she's been able to lever in another £275,000 as well. So really the sort of knock-on effect from your generosity has made a massive difference to the society and what it's been able to deliver. So first of all, thanks to all of you. 10 years ago, we had a very modest staff team. I think we had one conservation officer based in England, and Danielle had just started in Scotland. That's now built up to a team of 6 people. So if you don't know them, from left to right there, Sarah, who was our grants officer, but now has taken on a role of development and operations manager, managing the staff. Lauren, who you will have all met, our new engagement officer. Jess with the hat on, who's taken over membership. We brought that in as a staff role now rather than doing it as a volunteer through Lynn Curry. So Jeff covers membership and administration. Ellie, who many of you will know, who's been our English Conservation Officer for a long time. Andrea Hotspot, who can't be here today, she's our Scottish Projects Officer. She's got COVID, sadly. And then Danielle, our Scottish Conservation Officer on the right, who has also come down today. So a bit female-centric, but there is a little bit to balance that up. So we've also got this fellow on the books, David Hepper, our records officer, who plays another really crucial role of the running of society. And I've worked with really enthusiastic people in conservation all my working life. And I must say, I've never worked with such a bunch of people with such drive, such enthusiasm, and such an ability to inspire others. So I think we should be very proud of the staff team that we've been able to assemble over the last few years, and they're really delivering some great stuff for BDS at the moment. Sticking with David Hepper in the record side, I think the BDS recording scheme has also been an outstanding success. For each of the last 10 years, you've contributed between 50 and 100,000 records each year, a total of 714,000 records going up to the National Biodiversity Network, which is an incredible achievement. The actual amount of records is 2% higher than that because 2% aren't accepted. So a fantastic piece of work. And of course, that was recognised by the NBN a couple of years ago when they awarded the British Dragonfly Society the John Sawyer Award. So really good piece of work. And a lot of data. But what do we do with the data? Because of course data is pretty worthless unless something is done with it. So first of all, we use that data ourselves. So really significant publications over the last 10 years. The Dragonfly Atlas, much acclaimed, published in 2014. And then more recently, the State of Dragonflies report, which again has been very highly regarded. And quite recently, we had a request from Oxford University Press wanting to use some of the maps in the State of Dragonflies report for a new book that's coming out on climate change. So people are using our data. And David gets loads of external requests for our data. So we get requests from academics, research students, government organisations, NGOs, individual researchers, all using our data. And that is literally quite a small selection of what's come in. PowerPoint wouldn't let me add any more to the list. So huge success, and again, you're all very much part of that. Our Citizen Science Programme has been another really good piece of work over the few years. Ellie's going to talk about this a little bit later, so I won't say very much on it, but first of all, this is a good way of getting data, but often it's from a different sector of society, so it's a really good way of encouraging more people to get involved in nature conservation and taking interest in the dragonflies in their local environment. So I think this is an area of work that will remain very much part of our agenda. We've developed some really strong partnerships over the last 10 years, and that's really important for a small society with very small resources. We don't own any land or property ourselves, so by working with others we can actually achieve far more. It really is a case of 1 + 1 = 3. And over the last 10 years we've established partnerships with a whole range of organisations. So first of all, private landowners. This is Pat Batty, who many of you all know, on the Karur estate in northwest Scotland, which I think Danielle's going to be talking about a little bit later. Also in Scotland, we've recently signed a partnership agreement with Forestry and Land Scotland, which used to be called the Forestry Commission, which will give us influence over dragonfly management on a lot of their open land sites, of which they have a massive acreage. So this is a project which could have massive implications for Scottish dragonflies. We've also got partnerships with the Cairngorms National Park in Scotland, which I'll be talking about later. In England, the Ministry of Justice, doing work creating habitat on prisons. And another major area of our work involving partners is the Hotspot Program. So again, these sites are really important because we don't have our own nature reserves. But if we can work with landowners who are managing sites that have first of all got good dragonfly populations, but are also suitable sites for people to go and see and learn about dragonflies, then this is a much more effective way of us working. So this is a program actually started off in Scotland and been developed over the last 6 or 7 years, I guess. And for each of the hotspot sites, we have a hotspot charter which sets out what we expect of the site and the site managers. It sets out what BDS can offer in terms perhaps of interpretation for the site or helping out with training, things like that. But it also says how dragonflies themselves benefit from the site. So really, really good programme. I was going to check with you before, Lauren. Have we got 21 now in total? I think we've got 21. Anyways, so there were 10 in Scotland, and if you count the dots, there's one missing. My excuse is that there are 2 sites very close together. So 10 initial ones were in Scotland. First English hotspot was the Shropshire Hills in my part of the world, and that's the slide taking you down to the path taking you down to the dragonfly ponds at the Shropshire Hills Discovery Centre. But I think we've now got 11 English sites. And 2 new ones were declared this year. Somebody familiar there sitting on the fence, Tim? So yeah, the one I want to mention, the one I went to, is a really interesting one, Panshanger Park, which is a site just outside Hertford, owned by Tarmac. It's their regional office, and it's a place where I don't quite know how they managed it, but they've quarried a listed historic park, but with an understanding that it's restored. And they're now in the final stages of restoration. And I think it's in partnership with the local council and the local wildlife trust all involved. But Lauren has also been working with the people there, and they've created a fantastic Dragonfly trail, and the site became a hotspot this year. So I think a really good example of, who would have thought 10 years ago that we'd be working with Tarmac, a big construction company, talking about dragonflies. So really interesting way of moving. And they've even got a dragonfly on their logo for the park, and it's even a dragonfly with a swoosh. Engagement. So again, this is a side of our work that was sort of happened at a pretty low level 10 years ago, but through the appointment, first of all, of Fiona, who's here somewhere, and then latterly Lauren, it's becoming a really big and expanding part of our work, and it takes all sorts of forms. So it involves staff, trustees, volunteers going out to events. Sorry, there's two pictures there. We had the Wicken Dragonfly Centre for a while. Sadly, that's gone now. But then a big part of engagement is involving other people to sort of take out the message for us. So we've started a programme of appointing BDS ambassadors. That's Joel Ashton, who many of you will know, the wildlife gardener. And then, of course, we've got our celebrity connections too. So our patron, who needs no introduction, and our president, Mike Dilger, who, as Lauren said, was due to come today, but has sadly been unable to do. So it's really a combined effort to get this message out. But it's going to be a really important part of our work going forwards. And then we come to dragonfly successes. But we have to be a little bit careful here, because on the surface we could say, well, we've had the Wirral Emerald sort of sweeping through England, and we've got Lesser Emperor coming in, and all sorts of exciting things. But what we have to remember is that a lot of those exciting new occurrences are actually being driven by climate change. And probably for every species that's benefiting from that, there's a species that's losing out. So we just have to be a little bit careful in what we treat as successes that we've contributed to. But there are some. Some have done it by themselves. So Norfolk Hawker, of course, very much confined to a handful of sites in the Norfolk Broads a few years ago. And I remember talking to one of my colleagues managing National Nature Reserves there about 20 years ago about how do you write a management plan for a species whose sites are all going to be under seawater in 100 years' time. But thankfully Norfolk Hawker, for probably reasons that aren't wholly connected to climate change, has done its work itself and has now spread and is popping up all over the place. And then there are other species where we've had much more to do with it. So Whiteface Arter is one of my favourites. 10 years ago, it was only found on a handful of sites in England, and it had fairly recently disappeared from Thursley in Surrey and Delir Forest. But since then, with a little bit of help from us and others, it's been brought back into some of its old sites. So I think starting in about 2017, there was a reintroduction to Delir Forest, which has been, I think, moderately successful. But then there have been two much more successful reintroductions in Cumbria. So first of all, Fullshaw moss, where it had been found in the past, but laterally drumbruff, which is this picture. It's been introduced there, and BDS through through David Clark, has been very much involved in this, and it's doing really well there. And that's one of the first white-faced darters to emerge at drumbruff. And then similarly in Scotland, with the northern Damsel Fly, we've been doing some work with the Cairngorms National Park fairly recently to look at northern Damsel Fly habitat and improve that. I've just got an example here, which is, that's Glenmick Curling Pond in the upper reaches of the Dee Valley. You can see, like a lot of the northern damselfly sites, it was becoming quite scrubbed over, quite vegetated, losing open water, and a little bit of work with a digger, and that's what you can create. and already northern damselfly is responding to the work that we've been doing up there. You can see even the weather gets better when BDS have been doing management work. So those are some of the highlights of the last 10 years, and I think there's a lot to celebrate, and we should be really proud of our achievements. But we mustn't be too complacent about the position at the moment. 10 years ago, the main message in the conservation world was one of making a space for wildlife, and that's changed radically over the last few years. And the message now is really one of how do we save the planet as a habitable place to live, and how do we avoid ecological collapse. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And we're not just talking about climate change here. 10 years ago, we used to think of water quality was actually increasing. Our rivers were getting cleaner and better, and of course, that hasn't happened, or it's gone into reverse in recent years. And I think there was a report out recently that stated that no English rivers are now in a good chemical condition, and only 16% are in a good environmental condition. So water quality is a real cause for concern. And there's a lot to do. And I think the relevance here for BDS is that if we can inspire people to take an interest in dragonflies and an interest in management of their habitats, we've got then a mechanism for selling this message of how important the management of wetlands is to basically restoring the planet. We need to have fully functioning restored wetlands. So there's a much bigger message there that we need to be getting out. So what do we need to do? So I think that probably the most important thing is that our core business remains really important. We're a science-based organisation. We need that science on which to base our evidence. But I'm going to suggest 3 things that we need to be thinking about to make the BDS more effective and perhaps a little bit more influential, and making sure that we play our part in the work that needs to be done. So first of all, I'd suggest we need to be a little bit bigger. If we look at our membership, it's sort of hovered around the sort of 1,500 to 2,000, which I think is quite modest. And I think if we are going to deliver a more hard-hitting message, we really should have a bigger membership. So that's one thing that we're going to be looking at over the next few years. It has actually gone up a little bit since then. These figures are for April each year. And I think at current we stand at just less than 2,000. It has gone up a little bit, still fairly modest. I also think we need to be a little bit broader. So first of all, broader in our message, as I've just said, but probably also broader in our support base. If you look around the audience here, we probably represent quite a narrow sector of society in terms of age, ethnic origin, social class. There's not a lot of diversity here. So there's a huge sector of society out there that we could be engaging in dragonflies. So I think that's one thing that we need to be thinking about. How can we reach out to a broader audience? And then I suggest we just need to be a little bit bolder as well. We're not a political organisation. We're not a campaigning organisation, but that shouldn't stop us from actually sort of sticking our head above the parapet when there's something happening that we know is wrong and something needs doing about it. So I'd like to see BDS just trying to be a little bit more influential in that respect as we go forward. So there's just some personal thoughts for the future. But today is all about celebrating the present, what we've achieved so far. And today we're going to hear all sorts of presentations about different aspects of what's happening in the dragonfly world. So all from me, and enjoy the rest of your day.